What is happening at this point of time is that this is the fifth day of the Russian incursion into Ukraine. There have been reports of explosions and also of missile strikes. The Russian soldiers, we are given to understand, have been engaging in battles and skirmishes with the Ukrainian resistance on the outskirts of the city of Kiev and indeed in several other cities, including in the second largest city, Kharkiv. At this point of time, what really is the Russian objective and how long is Russia, of course, willing and prepared to stay dug in this operation in Ukraine? That's something a lot of people are talking about. And to give us more insights in terms of what Russia intends to do in Ukraine and how long it may want to stay put there, we're joined in by Mr. Alexander Bratusky. He's a senior analyst. He's joining us live from Moscow. Mr. Bratusky, the way the war is going and also in terms of what is being said by the leaders on both sides, from the Russians and also on the Ukrainians, there is a possibility that the leaders could in fact sit down for talks and negotiations. Do you see this invasion coming to an end anytime soon?
Yeah, a lot will depend on negotiations. Maybe the first stage of those negotiations would be a failure, but if talks will continue, might have some progress. Let's say with President Zelensky moral support from other European countries, he looks more like a war president, a former comedian. He looks more than a war president than somebody else. So it looks like if negotiations will start, if Ukrainians will be able to save their face, not to surrender on very bad terms. I mean, I would say realistic grounds would be sort of the Russia to hold certain parts of this Donbas territory, which is actually controls de facto, and Ukraine to have the provision that it will not join NATO anytime soon, so become a neutral country like Finland or whatever. There are two realistic options. And then Russia gets away from the whole Ukraine. This is most of the Ukraine. That's a possibility. Those are normality of the talks. But when we see events are going a little bit away, because when the negotiations were announced, President Putin has also put the Russian nuclear deterrent on alert. Yes, right. And this is also kind of a very bad sign. Although he's not, of course, going to strike the West, I would say realistically, with a nuclear button, because at this time, Russian Federation would be destroyed as well, because there's no winners in a nuclear war, as President Gorbachev and President Reagan once said, and actually that phrase was repeated by President Biden and President Putin a month before this situation. But we all will depend on how things will go, how negotiations will go, right? So
absolutely, indeed. And also, the idea that you put forth that Russia takes control of those breakaway regions in Donbas and then the rest of Ukraine possibly turns into some kind of neutral territory. That is like the best possible scenario, possibly for the Russians, and it also gives them a bit of a face saver to then withdraw. But the way things are going at this point of time, the Ukrainians have said that they are not going to surrender even if these negotiations are held, and they are dug in for a long conflict. That is how things look. Now, from the Russian perspective, do you think there is an appetite amongst the common Russians for a long, drawn-out operation in Ukraine?
Of course, even those who are Putin supporters, they want to swift operations. Sometimes people who are angry against the regime, but maybe not liberals themselves, they would say, why Putin stays in the same line as Clinton intervention in Yugoslavia and George Bush intervention in 2003 in Iraq. Yes, Milosevic was a bad guy and Saddam Hussein was a bad guy, but so those actions were not justified by the UN, by anybody. So, but when I see this just recent poll on the Rust Belt, whom you want to negotiate, and people say President Zelensky, but other parts say no negotiations, we have to win, and I have many people among the even the women from the middle class who are very much radicalized. We need to have Ukrainians to retaliate for Donbas and so on. Yes, there were atrocities, there were bad things committed in Donbas, but nobody was doing anything for 8 years. Even Russia was using this Donbas for its own purposes. So it looks like the situation, everybody play negative things for their own situation. Like, okay, right. You have Milosevic, you have Saddam Hussein, you have Donbas. Okay, we're gonna strike you. And this is the reason.
Now, at this point of time, as things stand, the West is, of course, ratcheting up the pressure. It started off very slowly because no one, in fact, expected that Vladimir Putin will indeed go ahead and order for an invasion into Ukraine. People thought that this is just a military exercise. That is what Russia kept insisting, that it has no intention of going into Ukraine, but it did 5 days ago. But now, with new sanctions coming into place, with the SWIFT payment system being taken off from Russian access, there are reports of people queuing up in front of ATMs because they want to get hold of cash, and ruble has collapsed. Do you think at this point of time Russians will hurt if this war were to continue for a longer time?
Yes, that's definitely. If we also have I just give you an anecdotal evidence. In my own family, my wife is now rushing to buy a new refrigerator because she says that things will go up, and so would be able to buy one. And I'm a modest person, but some people actually, of course, are shopping and buying whatever they want, and not the iPhones of the last model, but something that the necessaries that maybe a computer, which could serve some kind of scientist or professor for a longer while, because people who used to live in the Soviet times, they understand the shortages are, but the younger generations, they never lived through those, through those times. Yes, Russian companies produce decent stuff now, unlike in the Soviet Union, but what about the technology? Russia could produce decent jeans, but what about the technological stuff like chips? This is very difficult to get in. So, as I understand, then the war, if the war will continue, if Ukraine will turn into sort of a Yugoslavia, that means there will be more sanctions, there will be more people who will be hearing this, and of course there will be dissent within the ruling elite, which is not a monolith elite in Russia. And even Putin is taking his authoritarian steps. He's not a Stalin, and that's not 1930. You hear different deputies, the deputy from a Communist Party, not aligned with his position of the Communist Party of Russian Federation, it's very sad for communists. They're supporting the war. But some of the deputies, the younger ones, yesterday spoke out, and there's one guy who is a climatologist, a Russian professor, but he's on the official service on the climate conference. He has said that he is very sorry and he didn't support this. So You will see this more and more from people from different walks of life. I think even from the military people.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Alexander Bratiskai, for joining us from Moscow and getting us all those insights in terms of what Russia's objective at this point of time is in this war in Ukraine. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.